I stood in the parking lot across the street, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my husband raised his champagne glass. He was celebrating. My business partner clinked her glass against his, and they kissed. Not a friendly peck. A real kiss. The kind that made my sous chef look away uncomfortably. The kind that made our head sommelier whisper to the bartender. They were standing in my restaurant, toasting with my wine, surrounded by my staff, celebrating what they thought was their victory. "You're just the face," he'd texted me 3 hours earlier. "The smile that seats guests. I'm the one who built this empire." I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. They had no idea that in exactly 48 hours, they wouldn't have an empire to celebrate. Let me back up. My name is Madison, and 8 years ago, I opened my first restaurant. Not with family money or investor capital, but with a small business loan, 18-hour days, and a cookbook of recipes my grandmother had passed down. Lucia became the hottest reservation in San Francisco within 6 months. Food critics couldn't get enough of what they called my rustic elegance. By year 3, I'd opened Lucia East Bay. By year 5, Lucia Napa. 3 restaurants, 42 employees, $8 million in annual revenue. I met James during year 2. He was a food critic, actually. Came in for a review and stayed for closing. We talked until 3 in the morning about flavor profiles and childhood food memories. He was charming, well-traveled, sophisticated. Everything I wasn't. I'd grown up in a studio apartment in Oakland with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. He'd spent summers in Tuscany and winters in Provence. When he proposed after 6 months, it felt like validation. Like I'd finally arrived. We married quickly, simply. I was too busy with the restaurants for a big wedding. He understood. He always understood. That's what I thought, anyway. "Add me to the LLC," he said after we married. "For estate planning purposes. It's just smart business." I almost did it. I had the paperwork drawn up. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was my mother's voice in my head, telling me about my father who left when I was 3, taking everything. Maybe it was instinct. I told James my accountant advised against it. He seemed disappointed but dropped it. What he didn't drop was his campaign to convince me I couldn't run things alone. "You're spread too thin, Madison," he'd say, watching me review invoices at midnight. "You need a real business partner. Someone who understands operations." That's how Rachel entered our lives. Rachel was my closest friend. We'd met in culinary school, bonded over late-night recipe testing, and dreams of owning our own places someday. When her restaurant failed 3 years ago, I'd been there for her. Lent her money. Let her cry on my couch. When James suggested bringing her on as director of operations for all 3 locations, it seemed perfect. Rachel knew food. She needed a fresh start. I trusted her. She started 6 months ago. Almost immediately, things ran more smoothly. Inventory was optimized, staff scheduling improved, profit margins increased by 8%. I could finally breathe a little. Take Sundays off. Sleep past 5 in the morning. "See," James said, kissing my forehead. "I told you. You needed help." What I didn't know was that James and Rachel had been planning this for over a year. Long before Rachel ever started working for me. I discovered it the way these things are always discovered. Accidentally. 3 weeks ago, I left my phone at home when I drove to the Napa location for a meeting with wine distributors. When I came back early because the distributor canceled, I used James's laptop to check my email. He'd left it open in the kitchen. And he'd left his iMessage open too. The preview on the screen showed a text from Rachel. "Contract ready. Just need her signature. She'll never see it coming." My hands went cold. I clicked. What I found was worse than an affair. It was a complete dismantling of everything I'd built. They'd been communicating for 18 months. It started as commiseration. Rachel was bitter about her restaurant failure. James was frustrated that my business was in my name only. They bonded over shared resentment. The messages were meticulous. Calculated. Cruel. "James. She's good at the creative stuff, but she has no business sense. Once Rachel's in place, we document everything. Every mistake. Every oversight. Rachel. Already started. I'm building a file. Health code, concerns we can report anonymously. Staff complaints about hostile work environment. Financial irregularities. James. Beautiful. And the licensing agreement? Rachel. Drew it up myself. All 3 restaurant names licensed to a new holding company, our company. She signs over operational control. We slowly push her out as just a figurehead, then buy her out at pennies once we tank her reputation. I read for 2 hours. Every message. Every file. They'd been positioning Rachel as the one who saved the restaurants. They'd been deliberately creating problems for her to solve, making me look incompetent to staff and vendors. They'd been preparing to approach me with a restructuring plan that would sign away my control. The final message was from this morning. Rachel, she's signing Friday. I saw her calendar. She thinks it's a standard quarterly review meeting. I'll have the documents ready. James. And if she hesitates? Rachel. She won't. She trusts me. And she's exhausted. You've made sure of that. James. You're brilliant. Friday, then. By Saturday, we'll be celebrating in her restaurant. I sat in my kitchen, in the house I'd bought before I met James, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. That would come later, maybe. Right now, it was clarity. They'd made one critical mistake. They assumed I was just the face. The smile. The creative talent. They forgot that before the critics and the acclaim, I'd been a woman who fought my way up from nothing. They forgot that my grandmother didn't just teach me how to cook. She taught me how to survive. I took screenshots of everything. Every message. Every file. Every detail of their scheme. I uploaded them to a secure cloud drive. Then I called my attorney, Lawrence. I said when he answered, I need to see you today. It's urgent. 2 hours later, I sat in his office. How bad? He asked after I showed him everything. They're planning to present me with documents on Friday. Some kind of operational licensing agreement that would give them control. Lawrence reviewed the screenshots, his jaw tightening. This is fraud. Conspiracy. If you'd signed this, you'd have signed away everything. But I didn't. And I won't. What do you want to do? I thought about my grandmother. About starting over at 50 after my grandfather died, opening a small Salvadoran restaurant in a neighborhood where everyone said she'd fail. About her teaching me that the best revenge is not just surviving, but thriving. I want to end this, I said. Legally. Permanently. And I want them to understand exactly who they were dealing with. Lawrence leaned forward. I'm listening. The plan came together in 48 hours. First, the business architecture. I'd been smart from the beginning, even if I hadn't known why. All 3 restaurants were under one LLC, and I was the sole member. James was never added. Rachel was an employee with no ownership stake. Everything was in my name. The building in San Francisco, I owned. The East Bay location was leased, but in my name. Napa was leased through the LLC. They can't take what they don't own, Lawrence confirmed. But we need to act fast. If they get you to sign anything, even under false pretenses, we'll have to fight it in court. They won't get me to sign anything. Next, the documentation. Lawrence had me write out a detailed timeline. Every message. Every manipulation. Every instance of James pushing me to add him to the business. Every time Rachel had created a problem she later solved. We built an ironclad case of conspiracy to commit fraud. This is criminal, Lawrence said. I can refer you to a prosecutor. Not yet. First, I handle it my way. Then, the staff. This was the hardest part. I called a meeting with my management team. Not Rachel. Just my 3 head chefs, my general manager, and my HR director. People who'd been with me from the beginning. I need to tell you something, I said. And I need you to trust me. I told them everything. Showed them the messages. Watched their faces move from shock to anger to determination. What do you need? Marcus, my head chef at the flagship location, asked. Your silence. And your documentation. Anything Rachel has asked you to do that seemed off. Anything that felt like sabotage. Write it down. Email it to me from personal accounts, not work accounts. They did. Within 24 hours, I had a file an inch thick. Rachel asking Marcus to waste inventory so she could criticize food costs. Rachel deliberately scheduling the Napa location short-staffed during a busy weekend, then documenting it as my poor planning. Rachel meeting with a competitor, claiming she was exploring options but really feeding them insider information. My staff hadn't been fooled. They'd known something was wrong. They'd just been waiting for me to see it. On Thursday night, 36 hours before the planned ambush, I had dinner with James. Just the two of us. Date night, I said. His favorite Italian place. He was relaxed. Confident. He ordered expensive wine and held my hand across the table. You seem stressed, he said. Work? Always, I smiled. But Rachel's been such a help. She really has. You made the right call, bringing her on. He paused. Actually, she wanted me to mention something. There's a meeting tomorrow. Quarterly review. She has some ideas about restructuring. Might be worth hearing her out. Of course, I said. I trust her completely. His smile widened. I'm glad. She's good for you. For the business. I looked at the man across from me. The man I'd built a life with for 8 years. The man who was actively trying to destroy me. And I felt nothing but cold determination. James, I said carefully. Do you remember our wedding vows? Of course. You promised to support me. To be my partner. And I have been, he said, squeezing my hand. Every day. I smiled. I'm glad we had this conversation. Friday morning, I arrived at the flagship restaurant at 6. Rachel wasn't expecting me until 10. I let myself in with my key. Marcus was already there, prepping for lunch service. She in the office? I asked. Got here at 5. Said she had paperwork to prepare. I walked through my restaurant. Past the kitchen where I'd spent countless hours perfecting dishes. Past the dining room where I'd seated the first customer who ever walked through the door. Past the bar where James had proposed to me on a quiet Tuesday night, right before service. Rachel was in the office, my office, with stacks of documents spread across the desk. Contracts. Transfer agreements. Operating licenses. All the paperwork that would have signed away my life's work. Madison. She jumped up, startled. You're early. The meeting's not until 10. I know, I said, closing the door behind me. I wanted to talk to you first. Privately. She relaxed, thinking she had the upper hand. Of course. Actually, I'm glad you're here. I've been working on something exciting. A restructuring plan that would really optimize operations across all 3 locations. Tell me about it, I said, sitting in the chair across from what was supposed to be my own desk. She launched into it. The spiel they'd prepared. How she'd been noticing inefficiencies. How a new organizational structure would free me up for the creative work. How signing operational control over to a management company would insulate me from liability. She slid the documents across the desk. It's really straightforward, she said. Just needs your signature in a few places. I've already reviewed it with your husband, I hope you don't mind. James thought it was a great idea. I'm sure he did, I said. I picked up the papers. Scanned them. Saw exactly what Lawrence had predicted. Transfer of operational control. Licensing of the restaurant names. Authority to make financial decisions. All going to LRJ Management LLC, a company registered 2 months ago with Rachel and James as principals. This is really thorough, I said. Her smile widened. I wanted to make sure everything was covered. Oh, it is. I set the papers down. There's just one problem. What's that? You forgot to account for the fact that I'm not an idiot. The smile faltered. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd labeled evidence. Started reading the messages aloud. She's good at the creative stuff but she has no business sense. That was James, 18 months ago. Already started building a file. That was you. She trusts me. And she's exhausted. You've made sure of that. That was you 3 days ago. Rachel's face went white. Where did you? It doesn't matter where I got them. What matters is that I have all of them. Every message. Every file. Every detail of your plan to defraud me out of my business. She stood up. You don't understand. This was supposed to help you. Take the pressure off. Don't. My voice cut through her excuses. Don't insult me by pretending this was for my benefit. You were bitter. James was greedy. And you both thought I was weak enough to manipulate. Madison. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security is already changing the locks. Your personal items will be delivered to your home by end of business today. You're also receiving a cease and desist letter prohibiting you from contacting any of my staff, vendors, or customers. You can't. I can. And I am. You were an employee. Not a partner. Not an owner. An employee who engaged in fraud, attempted theft of intellectual property, and conspiracy. My attorney has copies of everything. If you try to fight this, if you try to claim wrongful termination, if you breathe one word of false information about me or my businesses, I will press criminal charges. Do you understand? She sank back into the chair. Where's James? I continued. He should be here for this. I don't. He's outside, I said. I can see his car from the window. I told him to meet me here at 9 for a surprise. He thinks we're celebrating. I walked to the door and opened it. You can come in now. James walked in, all smiles, holding a bottle of champagne. I saw Rachel's car and thought he stopped when he saw our faces. Sit down, I said. Madison. What's? Sit down. He sat. I closed the door. 8 years, I said. 8 years, James. I trusted you. I let you into my life. Into my home. Into my business plans and my vulnerabilities. And this is what you do? I don't know what Rachel told you, but I read the messages. His messages. Watched his face change from confusion to panic to something like anger. You went through my phone? Your laptop. You left it open. But that's what you're worried about. Your privacy? You're taking this out of context. There is no context that makes this okay. You and Rachel conspired to defraud me. To steal my business. To destroy my reputation so you could buy me out for pennies. Rachel stood up. Maybe we should all just take a breath. You need to leave, I said. Now. Before I change my mind about criminal charges. She grabbed her purse and fled. I heard her heels clicking rapidly across the dining room floor, then the door slamming. James and I stared at each other. Are you divorcing me? He finally asked. Already filed. You'll be served this afternoon. The house is mine. I bought it before we married. You'll have 30 days to remove your belongings. Madison, we can talk about this. No. We can't. Because there's nothing to say. You looked at everything I built and saw something to take. You looked at me and saw someone weak enough to exploit. That's not. Get out of my restaurant. Your restaurant? I helped build this. You were a food critic who showed up to review me. You didn't invest a single dollar. You didn't work a single shift. You smiled for photos and networked at parties while I was in the kitchen at 5 a.m. prepping for service. And you thought that entitled you to steal from me. I walked to the door and opened it. Out. He stood, trying to salvage some dignity. You'll regret this. I'll tell everyone what kind of person you really are. Please do, I said. I have 8 years of tax returns showing I earned every dollar. I have business licenses and loans and contracts all in my name. I have 42 employees who will testify about who actually runs these restaurants. You have messages plotting fraud. So please, tell everyone your side of the story. I'd love to see how that works out for you. He left. I stood alone in my office, in my restaurant, surrounded by 8 years of hard work and a lifetime of dreams, and I didn't cry. Not yet. There'd be time for that later. Right now, I had a business to protect. The staff meeting was at 11. Everyone gathered in the dining room before lunch service. My 3 head chefs, both managers, the entire front of house team, even my dishwashers and prep cooks. I want to be transparent with you, I said. Rachel is no longer with the company. She violated her employment agreement and my trust. Some of you might be confused by this. Some of you might have questions. I can't discuss all the details for legal reasons, but what I can tell you is this. Lucia was built on integrity. Mine. Yours. The integrity of our food and our service. Anyone who compromises that doesn't belong here. There was silence, then Marcus started clapping. One by one, the rest joined in. Now, I said, let's get ready for lunch service. We have a full book. The next few weeks were brutal. James moved out of the house, taking only what he'd brought into the marriage. The divorce was straightforward. We had no shared assets, no kids, just the dissolution of a partnership that had been rotting from the inside. Rachel tried to fight the termination. Claimed I'd fired her without cause. My attorney sent her the evidence folder, and she went quiet. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to Portland. Good. James tried to salvage his reputation. Told people I'd had a breakdown. That I was paranoid and controlling. That he'd only been trying to help. But here's the thing about small industries, everyone talks. My staff talked. My vendors talked. The story got out, not from me, but from the dozens of people who'd watched James and Rachel's plan unfold from the inside. Within a month, James couldn't get a reservation anywhere in the Bay Area. His consulting business dried up. He stopped showing up to industry events. I didn't gloat. I didn't gossip. I just kept working. 3 months after that Friday, I opened my 4th location. Lucia, Sacramento. Bigger than the others. More ambitious. A full bar program, private dining rooms, a test kitchen for R&D. The opening night was chaos, beautiful, perfect chaos. Every table full. Critics in attendance. My mother crying proud tears at the bar. And at the end of the night, when the last guest left and my staff was breaking down the dining room, I stood in the kitchen and thought about James's text. You're just the face. I'm the one who built this empire. I thought about Rachel's messages. She trusts me. And she's exhausted. You've made sure of that. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything. Then I went home, poured myself a glass of wine from my personal collection, and sat on my back deck looking at the lights of the city. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. So proud of you, Mija. You showed them who you really are. I smiled and typed back. No, Mama. I showed them who they never were. 6 months later, I was featured in Food and Wine. The headline was Madison Chen, the woman who built an empire on her own terms. The interview was in the flagship Lucia, the one where it all started. The reporter asked about James, about Rachel, about the difficult period in my business. I learned something important, I told her. When people show you who they are, believe them. And when they underestimate you, let them. It makes the victory that much sweeter. Do you have any regrets? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Only one, I said. I regret not seeing it sooner. But I don't regret how I handled it once I did. The article came out the same week James's consulting business officially dissolved. I didn't plan that timing. Sometimes karma just handles itself. Last month, I got a letter. From Rachel. No return address. It said, you were right. I was bitter and James was greedy. We deserved what we got. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I read it once, then threw it away. Apologies don't undo betrayal, they don't rebuild trust. They're just words people say when they finally understand there are consequences. Today, I have 5 restaurants. The 5th opened in Sonoma last spring. I have 63 employees, many of whom have been with me from the beginning. I have a life that's mine. A business that's mine. A future that's mine. And sometimes, late at night after service, I think about standing in that parking lot watching James and Rachel celebrate what they thought was their victory. Watching them toast with my wine in my restaurant, surrounded by my staff. I think about the text. You're just the face. And I smile. Because they never understood that the face of something isn't just decoration. It's what people see first. What they trust. What they remember. I was never just the face of Lucia. I was its heart. Its foundation. Its architect and its builder. And no one, not my husband, not my best friend. Not anyone could take that away from me. They thought I was the smile that seats guests. I was the empire that crushed them instead.